Yo, what's going on, everybody? Dave Lockram back again for the last time of the regular season, Week 18, breaking down every single game. This is a wild week. Every single year, there's some preseason vibes. Buckle down. We got a lot to talk about, and I want to make sure that you guys are fully equipped, whether you're fading my picks, whether you're tailing me, whatever it is, that I'm giving you all the information. Playoff seeding specifically, that's going to be super important. Certain teams have incentives. Other teams have nothing to play for. Other teams might bench their starters with a seed already locked up. I mean, there's a million different ways to approach this, so let's keep that in mind. Last thing I'll mention, I'm recording this on Wednesday, and at the time, following that obviously tragic event that we all saw with Damar Hamlin on Monday Night Football, I still don't have lines anywhere for Bills, Patriots, or for Bengals and Ravens. So I'm not including them in there. I will say, though, the first week over at Odd Shopper, insider access with all of our picks is entirely free, no strings attached. Links down in the description if you want to jump in on that. I'll also be posting all of the player incentive, contract incentive stuff in there, and we'll talk about that from a props perspective. But as of now, I don't have those lines. I'm not going to guess. We're going to go through 14 games. The other two I can drop in Discord as well. But it's time to get into it. A whole lot to talk about, a whole lot of implications, and a whole lot of teams playing for nothing. So let's make it happen. We'll kick it off with a little Saturday football action. We got two games, both with playoff implications. Of course, this Chiefs one, there's a little bit less that we know. We do know that they need to win, okay? We'll see what happens with that Buffalo and Bengals game, how that gets resolved, whether they play it at a later time, whether it's a tie or whatever. But essentially, the Bills, if they win out, get the 1 seed. The Chiefs are still very live for that 1 seed as well, though. They're 9.5-point favorites against the Raiders this week, 52.5-point total. And this one opened at 9.5. When I was looking at it this morning, it's at 7.5, and then it jumped back to 9.5 this afternoon. It's a weird game, too, because you saw Jarrett Stidham light up that, top-ranked elite 49ers defense last week. I mean, shit, it was the second biggest passing performance that the 49ers have allowed all season. The only bigger one was against Patrick Mahomes, and it was only the second time anyone's thrown for more than 275 yards on him. So to say that was shocking to anyone who isn't a Stidham fan or family or friend would be an understatement. Now, I don't think it's fair to say that that's a sign of things to come with Stidham. Also, dealing with an elbow injury, limited at practice, and I did find it interesting that when it, went 7.5 and then jumped straight back to 9.5, there may be something out there that we don't know about that suggests maybe he doesn't play this game. And if the event that he doesn't, you already have Derek Carr, who stepped away from the team to not be a distraction for the rest of the year. That would leave us with Chase Garbers if Stidham can't go. And if that's the case, we're in trouble. It looks, though, like Stidham should be in line to play here. These two teams don't have great defenses. The Chiefs' defense has allowed more passing touchdowns than any team in the league this year. They're 1-7-1 against the spread since the start of November. The Raiders have covered in 5 of their last 7, but still, like, how much confidence do you put in them? And all of these two teams have played in notoriously high-scoring games as well. Over the last 5 games since 2020, you're talking about totals of 59, 65, 57, 72, and 66. So pay attention to Jarrett Stidham's injury here because I tell you, I'll always give you guys a side, even if I don't have a great feel. I'll lean the Chiefs, but I like the over in this game, 52.5. because it could stay competitive, or the Chiefs could rout them 40-14 and nobody would be surprised. Next up, you got the Titans and the Jags closing out Saturday Night Football. I love the drama in the bad AFC South this year. It's been a lot of fun, despite the fact that, Ryan Tannehill is out. They're going with Joshua Dobbs. Malik Willis is benched. It still should be a fun game here. And quite frankly, I love what I'm seeing out of the Jaguars. They've won 4 straight. They're playing well. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's going to eventually be a stud. Travis Etienne's gotten his feet back underneath him. And Doug Peterson, God, what a sight for sore eyes he was after last year's coaching debacle in Jacksonville. But I got to tell you, this game has a 40 points total, okay? And Derrick Henry sat out last week, not because he couldn't play, but because last week was meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It all comes down to week 18. Derrick Henry can run on anybody, all right? Last week, you're dealing with Hassan Haskins, and I think you're still in a situation where if Derrick Henry pieces together a decent enough game, Tennessee stays competitive here in the last game that means anything this season for either of these teams if they want to win or if they're going to win. Now, I still like Jacksonville to win. I don't love laying 6.5 on them here, though. Divisional game, Derrick Henry back in the mix. Joshua Dobbs didn't look good last week, but he wasn't horrible either. That game stayed mildly competitive for a bit, even with half of the defense out for Tennessee. You're getting all of them back. Jeffrey Simmons is back and healthy. I think the defense does enough and Henry does enough to keep this game competitive and inside 7 points. So before, I had mentioned throughout the weeks that DraftKings was running a promo where you put $5 in, you get $150 in free bets if you win your bet. Right now, you put it on a big money line, whatever. Now they've completely changed it because through the 12th of January, all you have to do, using the link in the description or the one in the pinned comment, it's very simple. It takes a minute to sign up over there. If you have $5 in one hand and a minute in the other, you're taking $200 into the bankroll without having to do a damn thing. Because the minute you place that bet, you're getting $200 in free bets like that. No questions asked, no second thoughts, $5 into $200. Think of it this way. You could lose that $200 in free bets, right? That you didn't have yesterday. And you're still down $5 at the end of the day. Or you take that, maybe you throw together some 7-8 leg parlays. I don't know how you guys do it. You do some straight bets. You keep it simple. You build the bankroll up. Whatever it is, it's $200 that's being handed to you in return for $5. And you could turn it into five figures for all we know. So just an awesome opportunity at DraftKings. So much better than the bet 5 to win 150 if your bet wins. Your bet does not need to win. Nothing needs to happen outside of $5 deposited using the link below and put your money on a bet. Put it on a straight bet and you're getting $200 on the other side to do with it whatever you please. Who doesn't want $200 of free bets as we're heading into the postseason? Check it out. Link in the description and in the comments. Vikings laying 7.5 against the Bears here, 43.5 point total. This has changed a bit throughout the day for a couple of reasons. First, Justin Fields isn't playing. That's a pretty big reason. Also, earlier in the week, Kevin O'Connell said that he's probably going to play as starters or that he intends on it. Now, last week I mentioned with the Vikings game against the Packers that they're such a weird team that you should either be betting the Vikings money line or the Packers alt line. Because the Packers either rout them because every time the Vikings lose this season, they get blown out, or they come and they win in a game they're likely not supposed to. They got routed, okay? But every loss they've had has been double digits this season, all 4 of them. But now they travel to and every win has been by 1 possession almost. But they travel to Soldier Field. They have very little flexibility from a playoff seeding standpoint. They can go and get the 2 seed, but only if they beat the Bears and the 49ers, who are 14-point favorites at home against the Cardinals, lose. If they finish as the 3 seed, which is the most likely outcome here, and that's as far as they can drop, they'll face the Giants. Not the worst matchup at all. So I'm looking at this going, sure, you want the 2 seed. You'd love home field advantage, throughout not throughout the playoffs, but you'd like to have that higher seed in the event that you're facing a lower seed. But man, I got to tell you, the Packers just smoked them. That's one of the teams they could play if they get the 2 seed. The Lions, who had smoked them earlier and kept it competitive before this, early, week 3 or so, they actually kept that competitive and smoked them a couple weeks ago, or they get the Seahawks if the Seahawks make it in. So I know O'Connell intends on playing as starters, but I'm not convinced it's going to be for the entirety of this game. And then you have Nathan Peterman starting for the Bears. So you're talking about a Bears team with essentially, they already didn't have a passing game. They have no weapons in the passing game. And now they don't have a mobile quarterback. So you tell me how this plays out. The Bears defense and the Vikings defense are both terrible. If Fields was in, I would have loved the over in this game, particularly in the first half. And I think maybe the Bears can cover, but they don't. They have no way to exploit this defense. But the Bears defense is 31st in pass defense DVOA, 30th against the run. So with that in mind, give me Vikings -3.5 in the first half. First half -3.5, because if O'Connell pulls his starters in the second half, they've got this locked up, and Chicago backdoors, by the hook, it's going to be painful. So you have 3.5 in the first half. Presumably all the Viking starters are going to play all of that. Give me that instead of banking on whether or not they're going to be active in the second half. Also, the Bears could be gifted a first overall pick if the Houston Texans go out and win against Indy, which is a real possibility. So losing this game for the Bears could be extremely beneficial and shape the entirety of their long-term future. Browns are 3-point dogs on the road against the Steelers, 40.5-point total here. There's a true spoiler game for the Browns, who could erase any hopes of the Steelers making the postseason by getting a win here in Pittsburgh. Out of the gate, though, I like the under here more than anything. It's sitting at 40.5 points. Both teams are trotting out pedestrian offenses, but have buckled down on defense. Even the Browns secondary has been markedly better of late. Their run defense still stinks, but the Steelers have struggled to move the ball on the ground all year long. I mean, I know Najee Harris has looked fine, but this still has not been a team that can just dismantle you with 200 plus rushing yards. At least that hasn't been the case in almost every week. And essentially every game the Steelers play has been brutally low scoring. And the ones that they're winning have been by, one score, 3 points, most of them. I'm still not sure what to make of Deshaun Watson, truthfully. Mixed bag last week, 18 attempts, 3 touchdowns, but only completed 50% of those passes. But I kind of lean the Browns here to upset the Steelers on the road in a divisional matchup where they're looking to play spoiler, only because while Pittsburgh has clawed their way into a spot where they could potentially get into the playoffs, they're still live, but barely. It's hard to continue doing this with the squad that they have, particularly on offense. Browns might be able to show them here that they do not belong in the postseason on Sunday. The Bucs at the Falcons. All right, so we're still waiting on confirmation here regarding the Bucs starters, but Todd Bowles did say he intends on playing the healthy guys this week, and Tom Brady on his podcast said that he intends on playing and that no game is meaningless. What he means by that is the Bucs have already locked up the 4 seed. They won a terrible division. There's no mobility here whatsoever. And this game, since that happened, since we got word on that, moved from Falcons -7.5 to -4. Again, though, given what we know right now, I'm recording this on Wednesday, I'm still looking to a first half play here like we did with the Vikings, especially since we've seen Tom Brady start games in the final week of seasons in kind of meaningless spots, but not finish them. The Bucs first half money line is plus 145 right now, and that kind of seems like a nice spot to get to. I know they've sucked in the first half this season, bitten me in the ass a couple times, but they're going up against the Falcons team that's featuring Desmond Ridder at quarterback, who's been nothing more than a body to essentially just facilitate the run game, to set up the run game on as few passes as he can possibly attempt per game. The Bucs have the 11th ranked run defense. They've sprung some leaks at times, but they're still above average and they're healthy now. And the Falcons rank 30th in pass defense and 25th against the run this year. The last thing I'll say about this, the Bucs put together their best half of the season last week, unless maybe you want to say week 1 against Dallas where they ran it down their throats, but that seems like forever ago. I'd say this was the best game, best half for the Bucs all year, especially when you're talking about a passing game that has been stagnant from start to finish. They might look at this game. They probably will look at this game to keep the momentum rolling into the postseason after a really disappointing campaign. So I'm looking Bucs first half money line at plus 145 here in Atlanta. Jets at the Dolphins. Dolphins laying a point at home. Oh, sorry. You know what? That is wrong now. Dolphins are getting a point now at home with the news that it looks like Skylar Thompson could be starting this game. So Teddy Bridgewater dislocated his pinky finger. He's still not throwing. He's doing ball handling drills in practice, but he's still not throwing. And once again, Tua Tagovailoa is not expected to play. The Jets last week, what a disaster. I liked that spot for the Jets. They couldn't even stay remotely competitive. But I don't want to put too much stock into that. Mike White wasn't good, nor is he particularly good, but he's better than Zach Wilson. So is essentially anybody at this point. And the Jets' run defense imploded. Matter of fact, the Jets have just imploded recently. But the funny thing, though, is so have the Dolphins. Listen to this. Going into week 13, the Dolphins were 8-3, cruising into the playoffs. The Jets were 7-4. They've both lost 5 straight games heading into week 18. It's been a complete collapse for both teams on both sides. The only difference is Miami's not out of it yet. They need a win. They need a Bills win against the Patriots, which is more than doable in week 18. This is a lean for me, not a spot I'm confident in. Probably still a fun game to watch given the implications, but I'll lean Dolphins +1 at home now that line is swung through 0 with Skylar Thompson starting. And let's be fair, Skylar Thompson, after Teddy Bridgewater went down last week, was pretty much as effective as he was. So I guess when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at your disposal, you might not look all that bad. Texans at the Colts. Texans are 3-point dogs here, 38-point total. Texans disappointed last week, especially since a lot of money came in on them late, and they've been playing really competitive football. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them close out the season strong against Sam Ehlinger and the Colts, even though a loss in this game would result in them having the number 1 overall pick in 2023. I get it, right? Sounds counterintuitive. Doesn't make a lot of sense, because if they win and the Bears lose, Chicago would have the first overall pick. And because they'd almost certainly trade out of that pick, right? They have Justin Fields. There's no reason to draft a quarterback there. They trade out of that. They get a massive haul, set themselves up for the future. Could result in Houston not getting someone like, say, Bryce Young with the number 1 overall pick. We'll see how it plays out, but I'll tell you this much. Indy got steamrolled last week and has scored 13 points over the last 2 games with Sam Ehlinger, or over the last 2 games entirely. And Ehlinger, in the starts that he's made this year, they've scored 3 and 16 points. He's averaging 5.5 yards per attempt on 66 attempts. Jonathan Taylor's out. Yannick Ngakoue is on the IR. And the Colts handsomely paid offensive line cannot protect the quarterback no matter who it is. So Houston, believe it or not, has a pass rush in the top half of the league. And I'm looking Texans +3 here. It's at 2.5 in a lot of spots. I think it could move to 2.5 across the board, even with them live for that number 1 overall pick. Lovie Smith made it abundantly clear this week that they'll be playing to win this game. And at this point, we'll have to take his word for it. Give me the Texans +3 and the under 38 in this one. Ugly, low-scoring affair. Texans keep this one competitive. Panthers at the Saints. Oof, meaningless game. But one of the games that has like 0 playoff implications is right here. Neither the Panthers or the Saints have anything to play for this week. The Panthers are 3.5-point dogs on the road. You got a 41.5-point total here. But Steve Wilkes might actually have something to play for his team to play for, to keep him in Carolina next season. And all the reports are that he has overwhelming support from the players and everyone in this organization. They've all rallied around him since the beginning. He took a sinking ship. They got rid of Robbie Anderson, who cares, right? But rid of Christian McCaffrey, and are playing significantly better than they were before those guys, and more specifically, Matt Rule was out of Carolina. But narratives aside, the Saints defense has taken a turn for the worse this year. You know, they have struggled to contain the run, and that is how Carolina will beat you. We've seen it time in and time out. That's how they will beat you. And the Saints offense is average at best. So if I'm getting Carolina outside of a field goal +3.5 to close out the season, I think I got to take it, right? I mean, Sam Darnold, his fumbles last week led to Tampa Bay's victory. We all know that. But he threw the ball well for the most part. And he did in the previous week against Detroit, where they steamrolled a Lions team that desperately needed that win to stay alive for the playoffs. And all things considered, the Panthers are playing pretty good football right now. They really are, defensively, offensively. And the Saints' big win came last week. You know, that big win, emotional win for the Saints, where they still had a glimmer of hope to make the postseason, came last week against the Jalen Hurts-less Eagles in Philadelphia. Give me the Panthers +3.5. All right, it's time to get into the weeds with these 4 p.m. games. This is where it can get a little bit, I mean, it's ugly everywhere this week, no doubt. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. Please pay attention to the news that rolls in. Anything can happen at this stage of the game. We know that to be true every single week 18. And there's still so much in flux as well with what happens with Bills, Patriots, Bengals, and Ravens. But the Giants are on the road against the Eagles. They're 14-point dogs with a 43-point total. Can you believe the Giants have nothing to play for heading into week 18? No, it's not because they're the 1 seed, but it's because they've locked up the 6 seed and they can't go anywhere. The Eagles, however, do have something to play for. They can lock up the number 1 seed with home field advantage in a first-round bye with a win on Sunday against the Giants. But the thing is, if you're betting this game right now, I think you have to take the points with the Giants, because I'm not laying 14 on the Eagles when Brian Daboll he's been tight-lipped. He hasn't said who's going to start. He hasn't announced whether he's playing his starters or not, at least not yet. Plus, Hurts is returning from a 2-week absence. You know, this guy was a front runner for the MVP prior to going down against Chicago, or after that Chicago game. And we've yet to see how he looks in his return. That's another thing. Although he did have that beautiful bomb to A.J. Brown with the hurt shoulder late in that game against Chicago, but you get the point. Also, let's just say that Brian Daboll does decide to rest the starters, which is what the 14-point spread would suggest right now. Would anyone be surprised to see Nick Sirianni do something relatively similar in the second half of this game if they take a big lead and then the Giants backdoor into a 2-touchdown cover? I think that's way too possible, and there's way too many question marks to lay 14 on the Eagles right now, no matter how desperate they are to get this win and lock up the one. Give me Giants plus 14 as it stands right now. Cowboys at the Commanders. Cowboys are 7.5-point favorites, 41-point total here. Sam Howell is starting for Washington. Oh, man, it doesn't look good for the Washington Commanders anymore. And the Cowboys are still playing for the 1 seed at the same time as Philadelphia. Same time slot. Everything remains the same. It's unlikely Philly loses, but Dallas either gets, you want to talk about crazy movement here. Dallas either gets the 1 seed or falls all the way to the 5 seed, which is huge. So with a win and an Eagles loss, Dallas can capture the 1 seed. Washington can't protect the football or the quarterback, and Dallas has one of the best pass rushers in football. Given that, the likelihood of the Eagles losing is slim, anything is possible in these games. Hell, Dallas almost lost to Houston as 17-point favorites at home. Anything is possible. And the Eagles are coming into this game on the heels of a 2-game skid, albeit without Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew at the helm. But without the ability to protect your quarterback, it's going to be a long afternoon for this Washington team. I don't think Gibson plays. I don't think they get the run game going. Brian Robinson is pedestrian at best. Well, I'm laying the 7.5 points here on the Cowboys for them to get a big win going into the postseason. Cardinals at the 49ers. Man, here's another one for you, right? We talked about the Eagles and the Giants, 14-point spread. 49ers are 14-point favorites in this one with a 40-point total. I see this one a little bit differently, though, and I'll tell you why. The Cardinals have been eliminated for a while. The 49ers, however, can still earn the 1 seed, but they need a win and an Eagles loss in this spot. A win and an Eagles loss, I either way, it's them, the Cowboys. I get this. There's so much going, so many moving parts. Them, the Cowboys, and the Eagles, all vying for that 1 spot. Eagles obviously have the best odds. I forget exactly what the play is here, but the 49ers are live. So 14 points is a lot. I just don't see how the Cardinals put up any points here against an elite defense. And yes, I saw what happened with Jared Stidham last week and the Raiders, but that's more of an anomaly. That's an exception to the rule until I'm proved otherwise, until the 49ers defense that has suffocated teams all year, including the Cardinals with Colt McCoy at the helm in Mexico several weeks back. Until they're proven otherwise, I can't look at one game and assume that they've just fallen apart out of nowhere because Jared Stidham carved them up. It's David Blau at quarterback for the Cardinals. It's no DeAndre Hopkins and very potentially no James Conner either. So your starting running back could be out. Your top receiver is already out. And you're down to essentially a 4-string quarterback because you went through Kyler, you went through Colt McCoy, you went through Trace McSorley, and now we're at David Blau. I'll typically avoid games like this, and I don't think I bet this myself, but I'm leaning San Francisco 14. Even if they go up early and decide to give some starters rest late in the game, we're still talking about a 4th-string quarterback who would love, or who would have. Think about this. How does he claw them back from a big deficit in this game? It seems unlikely. It seems very unlikely. And with the 49ers healthier than the Eagles right now, I think there's a less chance of Shanahan resting some of his guys later in this game than the Eagles against the New York Giants. Rams at the Seahawks. Rams getting 6.5 on the road, 41-point total. The Seahawks put a beating on the Jets last week, but they still haven't done enough for me to feel good about laying 6.5 on them this week, even if it's inside a touchdown. It may seem crazy. I wouldn't blame you for just completely fading me on this one. But, the Rams don't benefit from losing this game. They don't benefit in the draft. The Lions have their pick in the first round. Sure, it helps in the second round, but not in the first round whatsoever. They're playing with house money at this point in a divisional game against a Seahawks team that they could spoil. Not to mention, Seahawks looked like they had the playoff spot all locked up earlier in the year before losing 5 of their last 7 and nearly losing to the Rams back in week 13. That was after Stafford and Kupp went out as well. So I still think the Seahawks get the win here. They make the playoffs with a win and a Packers loss, which is tough, but I don't feel confident that it's going to come particularly easy for them. And it didn't earlier this season either. Rams plus 6.5. Chargers at the Broncos. +3 are the Broncos at home, 3-point dogs. It's gross, but I kind of like the Broncos here. They hung strong against the Chiefs last week with Hackett gone. They got Russell Wilson running a little bit, had 2 rushing touchdowns. Look, he wasn't great through the air, but if you look at this game, it actually, this is the type of matchup that does set up well for the Broncos. Now, they have nothing to play for outside of pride in a disastrously embarrassing season. The Chargers do, because if the Chargers win, they lock up the 5th seed, which means that they're playing either the Jags or the Titans, right? Which is a far cry from being the 6th seed and having to face one of those top 3 teams, you know, having to maybe meet Kansas City or Buffalo or Cincinnati. That doesn't seem all that fun. But they are a insanely pass-heavy team. And that kind of plays right into this the wheelhouse of the Denver Broncos defense. Sure, you know, Patrick Mahomes could put up some numbers against you, but Patrick Mahomes has had some tough games against the Denver Broncos. No doubt. He got picked off several times against them earlier this year. I think you guys get the point, right? Like this is a secondary that if the Chargers can't establish a run game, it's going to be tough for them to run it up here. And they beat the Broncos earlier this season in LA. That was an overtime game, low scoring as well. I like the under here, and I like the Broncos to cover at +3 at home. Last up, Sunday Night Football, baby. Lions +4.5 at the Packers, 49-point total. This game kind of sucks because of all of the games on the schedule. This is the one where I don't know why they put it at Sunday. Look, I'm not going to fault the schedule makers. What an insanely tough job that is to set this schedule with all the implications, trying to make sure that they're all lined up appropriately. But it sucks because it's possible that the Lions will already know their fate by the time this game kicks off on Sunday night. In order to make the playoffs, they don't just need to win, but they need a Seattle loss, and Seattle plays earlier in the day. So it's tough. And Seattle needs a Green Bay loss as well, assuming they win against the Rams. Even if Seattle wins, though, does Dan Campbell not feel like the type of guy that is going to rally the troops, fire this team up to put together a solid performance against the divisional foe and get a finishing record on the season above 500? He does to me. Maybe that's narrative driven, but we know what type of guy he is. We know that this team has played for him all year. And Detroit beat the Packers earlier this season when Aaron Rodgers threw 2 touchdowns in the end zone. It's certainly a different Packers team now, no doubt. But it's also just hard to put our finger on the pulse of this game because so much is dependent on what happens with the Seahawks. It's also possible that Detroit just looks to play spoiler, even if they're out of it. And which, like I said, given Dan Campbell's mentality, is not something that would surprise me at all. So I think it's a close loss here. I don't see them getting smoked. And Aaron Rodgers has definitely looked better of late since that bye. But give me the Lions +4.5 here, just with so much unknown. Otherwise, I'm waiting to bet this game until closer to kickoff, and we'll have all the time in the world. It's the last game of the slate. Appreciate you guys watching. As always, it's been a great season. Thanks for the support. I'll be back, though, next week as we kick off Wild Card Weekend, so don't go anywhere. You know where to find me. Peace.